Hello SGD, Sacred Geometry Decoded. I'll do a drawing exercise and I'll link the video in the description. Also a couple related ones on geometrology because of how this very simple, very nice geometry can also be used to, especially if you're comparing the metric and the imperial system, how relative size of Earth and Moon orbits, the length of months, the distances between the inner planets, just all happen to work ever so nicely on this geometry. But I'll link this video where I showed how to draw the tree of life, because that's why I really like this geometry style, the Vesica, Pisces, that type of thing. Really just from the Vesica, it's a great template to draw so many things. And today I'll draw the 7-pointed star, or the heptagon. So just as a reminder of this video, the basic template was for drawing the tree of life. I'll just show that over here first. That was a construction line, and then make it a little bit smaller, then a double Vesica Pisces. So Vesica Pisces, the center of the second circle on the edge of the first, the construction line to keep them all in line, and then the double Vesica Pisces is, as it's called, so it's just 3 circles arranged along that line. That was the template for this tree of life design. Now, because I want to draw it a little bit bigger, we'll still be using this, but I'm just going to make it larger, so we only actually need a portion of it, because what we need to draw is the Star of David, or the hexagram, is again, now I forget the name for it. Other versions, is a very, very old design, goes back to Sumeria. You'll find it in all sorts of ancient places, but we only really need this central circle and the points created by the double Vesica. So essentially we'll be drawing a hexagon or a hexagram. One of the beauties of why beehives and stuff are made of that is because it's the most efficient use of space, where you have a minimum amount of wall to give the structure strength, but you have a maximum area in between. So I have that central circle of the Vesica there, but I don't need, I will be drawing these, but I only need a portion, so it just fits on the page. So same thing, I would have draw a Vesica, but it's going to run off the page, so it's not necessary. We only need these points, and we'll do the same on the bottom. Okay, now this is one of the beauties of a hexagon. So the compass sets the radius of the circle, but now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points around, and the edge length of a hexagon is equal to the radius of the circle. Beautiful, just fits perfectly, and in essence it's like 1 equilateral triangle, 2 equilateral triangles, 3 equilateral triangles, and then so it's just 6 equilateral triangles. They perfectly wedge together, and we have a hexagon. Now let me go over. Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 points, but what I need to do is to draw a Star of David. I want to use that point, this will bleed through. So I'm going to draw an equilateral triangle. Since all sides are equal, all triangles have 180 degrees, and therefore it has to be 60 degrees on either. Anyway, we're just going to draw a Star of David. I should pay more to be neater, but again, I just want to illustrate the point rather than you can repeat this. And the 7-pointed star, as with a 7-sided or 7-pointed star, just like with the 9 or the 11 or the 13, and technically they're impossible to draw perfectly with compass and straight edge. So this will be an approximate, and it's not even the best approximate. I'll link If you haven't seen Geek 37 channel, just Google YouTube search Geek 37 heptagon for a lot of different designs. He does a lot of videos on these and shows other styles, and you can also follow along with that. Now, again, I'm trying to keep my compass point on the tip, adjust the ruler, keep in mind the thickness of the pen so you don't line up the ruler perfectly. You have a little bit of a gap, and if you get it right, it should hit the spot. Okay, what we need to do, and again, this is an Albrecht Durer method, and it is imperfect, and it's not the most accurate of these designs. Now, actually, I didn't even really need to draw the whole thing, but I still just want to again show that point. Now, what I'm also going to do now is go from point to point across the center, and not all of these construction lines are necessary, but I'll just do it. I'll do them all just to keep it symmetrical. And again, it's just one of those things where there's sort of, you know, patterns within patterns, and so if you see a six-pointed star like this, or even just the hexagon and the lines that would join up around it, you have a great template for a very good approximate of a heptagon. Now, okay, I mentioned the hexagon, so that has 6 sides. Make the ruler zip a bit, keep that on light. Okay, I had the construction line. So I mentioned a hexagon is made up of equilateral triangles, so, and it's 6-sided, 6-pointed, so 360 divided by 6 equals 60 degrees. So the, if you want to call it the, actually, what we have here, from this point to this point to the center, if I was to complete that line across, I would have an equilateral triangle. So the core angle, the heart angle of a hexagon is 60 degrees, but now we want to do 360 divided by 7, and what we get is 51.482, and then it's just that repeat, like a repeating of the 7th 1/7 decimal, but what we get is 51 3/7 of a degree. That's the ideal version, but again, with compass and straight edge, you cannot actually get that, not perfectly. But so again, this is an approximate, and what I want to do now is put it there on the point, and I'm going to adjust my compass so that it sits on that line. Try to be as accurate as I can. Get my point better. Okay, now I just need to draw that section of arc, or just so that it touches the circle. Okay, now that distance will give me something very close to 1/7 of the circle. So now I'll see how good I get it. Now, even if you do it perfectly and all the lines are perfect, it won't be exactly 1/7. It'll be close, but not exactly. Let's see, it's always a bit tricky when you run these out, because even if I'm only 0.5 millimeter off, when I repeat it 7 times, I'm 3.5 millimeters off, so then you'll really start to notice it. So I'll see if I can get it reasonably good the first time. But again, these little errors will build up, so the thickness of the line and exactly where you put your point. There you go. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points. So if you run it through GeoGebra or you know, run the math, it won't be perfect, absolutely perfect. But again, when you do these approximates, the thickness of like it's off by a little fraction of a degree. which will, the thickness of your pencil line will usually, in good approximates such as this, the pencil thickness will be greater than the margin of error that comes from those drawings. So now I have 7 points. Now I'll just run that out. And again, because it's a 7 point, so it's an odd number. So again, that hexagon or hexagram, I needed to draw, so I could have, in one line, without taking the line off the paper, drawn an equilateral triangle, but then I'd have to take the pen off the paper and draw a second equilateral triangle, because at 6 it's an even number. Just like the pentagram or the pentadecagon, which I drew recently with 15 pointed star. It's one of these stars where you can just keep the point on the page at all times and run it. Now I'll do this thick so it stands out better. And then look, again, I could keep my pencil on the page. Jeez. Make sure your ruler's nice and stable. Some friendly neighbourhood gunfire. Fireworks. No need to panic. The young kids that get excited these days. Back in my day, we basically went and bought dynamite from the local store, but if I named one of our entertainments back in the day in regard, we'd get fireworks, take them apart, put them inside a copper tube, and if I said what we called them, I'd probably get flagged for, but copper B was what we used to make in my day, back in, right, make sure that, and the last line to bring it back. Probably shouldn't have drawn that hexagram underneath so dark, because it doesn't, let's darken that up a bit. Try this one. Now I really need to be careful, because I don't want to, if I slip with this, I'll really ruin it. That's not going to be much better. I'll ruin the drawing and use a really thick point. Not that that's making it stand out too much better, but and with something, if I was to hold that point down and adjust it, that would just, the ink would just soak up the paper and leave dirty, great big lump there at the point. So a little bit better now, a bit easier to see the heptagon or the 7-pointed star. Now the hard angle of a heptagon is 51.482 degrees. The slope angle of a great pyramid is 51.84 degrees. So if I was to so there's basically where we'll, okay, I'll flip that around, I'll show that in a moment. I'll just finish off this. And especially the 7 is very, especially in well, just the number 7 appears so often, you know, like 7 days of a week, 7 levels of ritual in the school, in the ISIS mystery schools, in Mithras cult. You know, what else? So many 7s. The 7, you know, like Rome, and so many other cities are built on 7 hills. just one of those, sort of very often used numbers. It doesn't stick on. So there's your heptagram, 7-pointed star. If I was to join those points, I would have a heptagon, or a 7-sided polygon. And as with all of these, there's just so once you've drawn a star like this, whether it's a hexagon, all you need to do is go start at one point, and you could use the center line, but notice this V, this chevron, this trough, that's already cut it in there. But now if I was to go again, like the construction itself will now give me, because it's going to bisect the points, and so I'd get a middle in between each of these, and then I could do a 14-pointed star, and then I could do a 28-pointed star, and then a 56-pointed star, and go as far as you want. Alchemy, the 7 basic operations in alchemy, the 7 basic metals, like mercury, silver, gold, iron, copper, and tin and lead. Is it lead? The 7 planets, the 7 heavenly bodies, in the old way of thinking about these things as well. So that's why it's a cool one. I'll stick a couple of illustrations, especially in regards to alchemy and the old gods as well. It's a very important number as well. Now it's also what you always have is this. So on the inside, I actually have another 7-pointed star, which is truncated. Would you call it? I'm not exactly. But again, if you want to do these drawings, especially now if I was to repeat that and draw a 14-pointed star, how are we going? Okay, but I mean, it just in terms of you'll want to be a little bit arty with it. You can sort of start colouring in these shapes, and again, if you just repeat these stars, it's going to start really quickly becoming quite a very nice, very complex, very nice looking geometry, sort of on the inside and out. And there's all sorts of ways to use this as well. So as an artistic template, just the way you arrange things, or just the pure sort of geometry of it, and then to what you'll have is the more points you make from 7 to 14 to 28, especially on the inside, you get this really nice geometry appears, and the more you'll do, the more you'll find that it creates a circle in the middle as well. But I'll leave it up to you. Then it's just a matter of repeating the process over and over, and there's your heptagon. I have drawn this before, 5-6 years ago or whatever, but I was asked recently in one of the sort of live in the chat zone there when I posted the drawing. So that's your heptagon. SGD, cheers, have a good one. I'm also very interested in all the history of Hermeticism, but also the relationship to alchemy. Now, my interest in alchemy is not in the spiritual sense, it's more in how it led to development of modern chemistry. Now, here's a classical alchemical image. I didn't adjust. Now, maybe you'll see the pointer floating around. What we have is 7 steps, and there are also 7 figures standing here on top of this hill at the top. But this is by Stefan Mikkelsbacher. But what those figures represent, so I have Venus, Mars, the Sun, Mercury at the top, Moon, Jupiter, Saturn. Now, Sun or Sol, Moon or Luna, there are other names for it, but those symbols which apply to these heavenly bodies or the planets as well, because obviously the Moon, Sun not a planet, those astronomical symbols are also the symbols for copper, Venus. Mars is iron, the Sun is gold, Mercury is mercury, the silvery moon, the moon and silver, tin is Jupiter, and Saturn is lead. So these are interesting connections. Now even think about Venus. She's female, and copper has a beauty to it, as where iron like rusts and tends to be hard, and Mars, the god of war. But when it comes to 7, now I'll compare it to this other from Azoth of the Philosopher's Stone. This is from Basil Valentine, but the drawings come later. Dennis William Hawke. But the point is that you still, so 7 figures and 7 steps on the left-hand side, but on the right-hand side, what we have is a heptagon, a 7-pointed star, and the same chemical symbols or metallurgical symbols for gold, silver, mercury, copper, iron, etc. Also the anima spiritus corpus, but that's got to do, that's salt, sulfur, mercury. So now this illustration is from the alchemical works of Isaac Newton. It's a bit uncomfortable for some people that Isaac Newton was an alchemist. But again, so what we have is 7 pointed stars around the central point. Now there's feminine and masculine, sanguine and laconic and phlegmatic and stuff like that, but it's just that point in regards to this sort of being very important in alchemy. This is obviously not a heptagon, but it's just a much clearer image where you can see those 7 figures and how they represent the gods and the planets. But so for instance, the sun would be Apollo, the moon would be Artemis. But underneath, so in 7 we have the 7 steps, and these were the 7 operations of alchemy. So tincture, coagulation, distillation, putrefaction, solution, sublimation and calcination, and they're still pretty much standards in the lab. Now a tincture is an extract dissolved in alcohol, so you get laudanum was opium dissolved into alcohol. You'll find it in Rosicrucian works. So you'll see a lot of geometry and chemistry and science in these hermetic, like obviously they did have a lot of spirituality and their philosophy to them, but embedded, what's always repeated is this connection with chemistry / alchemy and the geometry and the astronomy in there as well. You can't really separate those. So coagulation, so you might think, you've heard of blood coagulating, but coagulation is also done in cheese making as well. So Aristaeus, anyway, coagulate. Now this is a famous image, but what you have on one hand, solve, on the other hand, coagulation. And you'll see it in other classical alchemical imagery as well. So one hand has coagula, the other arm has solve, which is solution, solvent. So distillation, whether it's fuel or for alcohols, and again you'll see it in all the old works. And putrefaction, which is also fermentation or blackening. So for wine making, fermentation, beer making, so it's these applications that are overlooked as well. Now also a symbol, was tartar, but anyway, that's beer, wine, Dionysus connection with that type of stuff, but fermentation or putrefaction. So putrefaction, probably think more of like rotting bodies, but that's actually on the Negretto, but that's actually what's happening in fermentation. It's essentially it's a form of rotting. Solution or solvents, classic. So you go back to that image by Levi. So we have coagulation on one side and solvent on the other, which is sort of opposing forces, you could say. Sublimation, again, these are like still like core operations in the chemistry labs still now. So vaporize, okay, that's an example of sublimation. And calcination, which is to burn, to reduce things to ashes and extract essential what makes those things up as well. And again, you'll see these symbols in all sorts of different themes, but whether it was even Arab alchemy to later European period, and these symbols appear in much older parts of the world as well. But yeah, so George Washington statue, solvent and coagula. Notice where coagula is holding the sword as well, so blood. And I've done a whole series on these symbols, whether it's their geometric, astronomical, alchemical as well. But so just as an add-on in regards to the use of the heptagon as more than a few links and examples through the really famous alchemists as well. So it's just an add-on, probably it doesn't really fit with the geometry series. I'll put a link in the description. I did a whole series on these famed hermeticists and alchemists, and that a lot of these nice illustrations are actually carrying quite a bit of geometric, astronomical, metrological, chemistry / alchemy information in there as well. And you'll see with like whether it's John Dee, Albrecht Durer, and Robert Flood, they were all professors of Euclidean geometry or are shown doing geometry as well. So I think it's an important feature. All right, so that's it. That's the heptagon. This is one way to draw it. And now, for instance, with his heptagon, I mean, if you wanted to draw something like you see here on the right hand side, also John Dee used a 7-pointed star in his more mystical work, let's say, as well. I should have included that picture in there, but it's just one of these things you'll see throughout these, the famed occultists, hermeticists and stuff as well. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed, and get your compass and straight edge out and have a good time. Cheers.